Coming up next on Kids TV and Me, author, illustrator, and children's television enthusiast Joshua Stauffer will be talking to you today about this.
Using your voice is the most personal way to make music. And when voices join together, the result can be a glorious sound. Dr. Walter Turnbull has made the Boys Choir of Harlem his life's work.
Once again, please. You know, it's something about mine that doesn't get legato. I will lift up mine eyes. I have to have singing through the mind. Very often kids don't realize that they can sing, and that's the joy of discovering children who have an ear, who have a voice. Not everyone has a singing voice, but I'm often known to tell the kids I can teach a doorknob to sing.
Hello everybody, Joshua Stauffer here, back with another episode of Kids TV and Me. This is episode 10, and I just want to say, Happy March! Welcome to March 2026, for those of you who are listening to this brand new. I certainly hope that the air is nowhere near as dry in your presence than it is in my presence. I'm currently recording this in the beginning of February, and the weather is very, very cold. The air is very dry. My throat's not too bad at the moment, but it's really difficult to find decent recording days, because when the air is dry, my voice doesn't work right. Hopefully I'll be able to get all of the March episodes recorded in time for you guys, but if there's any delay in the near future, this is why. But anyways, enough about that. Today we're going to be talking about Reading Rainbow, the 1998 episode, When Aunt Lena Did the Rhumba. Just like all the others on this TDK HS video cassette that I have here, this was an episode that I watched for the first time in 2001 when I was 3.5, and it came out in 98, so that episode was still kind of new compared to the ones from the 80s. And that was also the final season that's used the original opening scene, so the original version didn't last very long on those episodes, because they changed it over to the new one about a year or two later. So this should be a lot of fun. Unfortunately though, I'm sad to say that I was not able to find the book When Aunt Lena Did the Rhumba at the library. As a matter of fact, I even checked the online catalogs for Lancaster County libraries, because there's over a dozen different libraries in Lancaster County, Pennsylvania, and none of them have this book. I was surprised. I mean, I'm actually surprised I was able to find The Milkmakers and not this, because The Milkmakers is a much older book, and I don't even think that's in print anymore. I don't know if When Aunt Lena Did the Rhumba is currently in print now, but with it being a much more recent book, I would think it would still be available. Yeah, When Aunt Lena Did the Rhumba is actually not much older than I am. That book was published in 97, the year I was born. I would assume that the library would have had it at one point. I can't believe they got rid of it already. It was kind of fun to discover that they had that old copy of The Milkmakers, though, with the original date stamp card slot in the back. And speaking of The Milkmakers, before we begin today's episode, there's two more things I want to say about The Milkmakers that I forgot to mention last month. Now, first of all, that scene where LeVar and Randy Riga were in the modern dairy facility. LeVar was learning how to milk a cow with a machine. Right before they put the machine on, LeVar took this thing to put the iodine stuff on the cow's teats to kill any bacteria, and LeVar said, "Little dipple do ya," to which Randy responded, "A little dipple do her." That was a very funny, clever little reference to the vintage commercials for Brill Cream, because their tagline was, "A little dabble do ya." I don't know if that commercial originally popularized the term "little dabble do ya," or if it was something that was pretty common to begin with, but later on I discovered that old commercial. I have this DVD set with 1,001 classic commercials, and one of them was the commercial for Brill Cream, and it had a little jingle song that said "Little dabble do ya."
So remember, Brill Cream puts life in dry hair. Brill Cream, Brill Cream, Brill Cream. Brill cream, a little dabble do ya? Brill cream, you look so debonair. Brill cream, the gals will all pursue ya. They'll love to get their fingers in your hair. Get Brill cream today in the handy unbreakable tube.
I don't know how late they used those commercials, if they were still around in the 80s and kids knew what that was, or maybe they saw it in the 70s when they were younger, I don't know. But yeah, it was kind of funny that they referenced that on Reading Rainbow. And speaking of 1001 classic commercials, we'll be talking about a lot more of those when we get to the episode The Sign Painter's Dream, because there's lots of old commercials in that one. Now, another thing about the Milk Makers, in the animated segments The Milk Trotters, the announcer was played by Marv Albert. I had no idea what that was, but I didn't realize until after I finished recording that episode, that podcast episode, that Marv Albert was actually a real basketball announcer for many, many years. And they brought him on Reading Rainbow as like a celebrity guest to do this voice for the cartoon announcer for the Milk Trotters. Very interesting. Alright, now that we got that stuff out of the way, let's begin today's episode when Aunt Lena did the Rhumba. One thing I noticed about these late 90s episodes with the updated intro is that they kind of quickly cut into the episode, like immediately after they finish singing Reading Rainbow. Like they don't spend any additional seconds doing the woo doo 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 doo. Like I'm surprised they made the last few seconds of animation with the rainbow going around slow. Like, I think I would have thought they would have kept that fast if they were going to be done with that so quickly. But anyway, let's take a look at our first segment here. Okay, it sounds like LeVar is singing something, and there's the words hosted by LeVar Burton. That's the 90s style font for that text. And it seems like LeVar is singing in the shower, because we see what looks like this kind of textured glass, and it's got all these water droplets behind it, and it looks like the shadow of LeVar on the other side. And LeVar is singing, "Today, I'm heading down to old Broadway." I'm not the best singer, but that's what he sings. And after he sings that, he turns off the water and opens the shower door and just looks at us and says, "Hi." Wow! That's a really strange way to start a kid's show, especially a live action show with real people and a real live human adults host. Like who does that? Like, who would step out of the shower like that just expecting your friends or like a national TV audience to be right there watching you? Like, this is really weird, people. Oh my. Like, who came up with that idea? I mean, the writers on this show do sometimes come up with some silly ideas, but this really takes the cake. I mean, yeah, the parts with LeVar singing in the shower, that totally makes sense. But him just casually finishing his shower and stepping out of the shower and just looking at us and saying hi, that is very strange. Like, I can't imagine anybody doing that in real life. And no, we don't see anything that we shouldn't. They just show him from the shoulders up, of course, so no need to worry there. And he says that he's singing some of his favorite show tunes because today he's going to go to a theater. A live theater with real people singing and dancing. There's something we can talk about. The word live. When I was a little kid, I wasn't 100% clear as to what the word live meant. Because oftentimes, if I was watching TV and it was like a live broadcast of Nick Jr. or PBS or whatever, and it was not recorded on one of my tapes, my mom would tell me that this is not a tape, this is live. I didn't fully pick up the whole not a tape thing, and usually when I saw something that was on the air live, it was a very different episode than what I was used to watching on my tapes, and therefore I assumed that the word live meant kind of like a novelty episode of one of my favorite shows. An episode that I may or may not have seen before, but is very different than what I usually watch, because with my recorded VHS tapes, I watch those like over and over and over again, like from dozens to 100 of times. So if I saw an episode of Little Bear or Blue's Clues on a tape that I did not watch very often, the episode was like kind of a novelty for me, and I would just automatically assume that this episode was quote-unquote live. I thought that was the correct terminology for an episode that I don't usually watch. But it was on a tape, so obviously it wasn't live. It wasn't until I was a little bit older that I learned that live meant like live on the air and not recorded on a tape. But yeah, the first couple times I saw this episode of Reading Rainbow, and LeVar was talking about live theater, I figured maybe he meant like some really special novelty show that you don't see very often, record or not record. But I'd never really been to any kind of theater at that point, movie or live, so I wouldn't know the difference between a movie theater or a live theater. And yes, it's the middle of winter, so I am a little bit sniffly. Sorry about that. LeVar says it's matinee day in New York City, which means that the theaters are having a special afternoon performance. And so now LeVar has to decide which show he wants to see, and it's going to be tough for him because there's a lot to choose from. And as he's saying all this, he's just stepping out of the shower, grabbing his robe and bath towel and getting ready to dry off, and he's actually shivering just slightly. And then we abruptly cut to some scenes of New York City with some really lively grand music playing. And during that entire piece of music, there was a very quick montage of all these New York City and Broadway scenes. First we see Times Square, and then a street sign for Broadway. There's the big marquee for Beauty and the Beast. Another one for Luis Bravo's Forever Tango. The Phantom of the Opera. There's another sign that says Art. Was that a Broadway show? Art? I'm looking it up here. Art, A-R-T, was a critically acclaimed play by Yasmina Reza. It's a story about three friends arguing over a white painting. The production explores friendship and art. Okay. Never heard of that one before. And there's a sign for the Lion King play. We see a bunch of people running into the theaters. And hey, that quick shot right there actually looks like Stomp. I wonder if that little piece was filmed during the episode Zin 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 of Violin where LeVar went to meet Stomp. Stomp is this music group that makes music by banging around trash cans and brooms and all kinds of odds and ends. It's a percussion group. And this shot, they've got these big cans tied to their feet and they're trying to stomp around with them. And there's the girl in the background with the overalls banging around to the big blue bins. That's definitely Stomp. Yeah, because those guys were both on Reading Rainbow and Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood in the late 90s. Mr. Rogers went to see them too. And both episodes were really cool. And we see a bunch of other little shots of dancers. I don't know what these shows are from. The last shot shows some performers taking a bow. And then immediately after that, right at the very last beat of music, we see LeVar's kitchen and two slices of bread pop out of the toaster. That's a cool little glass that LeVar has that's got these three kids on it. And is that supposed to be a glass of juice there? It's got little sunshine rays out of it, or little lines of excitement, I don't know. Actually, it's not a little glass, it's actually a big pitcher of orange juice. And so the toaster just popped up, and LeVar's walking into the kitchen, saying da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da. And he's all dressed now, he's got some newspapers and magazines. He's going to study them while he eats breakfast, to try to decide which play he wants to see. Not sure what else he's eating for breakfast. Maybe he has some eggs there on the table. Some toast and eggs and orange juice and maybe some coffee. Looks good. The first couple times I watched this, I thought this was the same kitchen that they showed on the episode How to Make an Apple Pie and See the World, but I think it's a different one. I don't know if this is actually LeVar's real house, or if it's a studio set, or if they filmed in somebody else's house. I don't know. It's a very nice looking house, though. Nice kitchen. And as LeVar sits down and gets ready to have breakfast, he tells us that seeing a Broadway show in New York is something that millions of people do every year. And even though there are wonderful theaters in every city and town, a Broadway theater is just, well, it's bigger. Famous for being the best of the best. And that's true, we do have some wonderful theaters in Lancaster, Pennsylvania, we have the Dutch Apple Dinner Theater. I've been there a couple times. And we also have the Fulton Opera House in downtown Lancaster. I've never seen any shows there, but I did go on the behind-the-scenes tour once or twice. So that was kind of cool. And of course, in nearby Strasburg, we have the Sight and Sound Theater, where they do these big performances of Bible stories that are actually a lot more elaborate than most Broadway shows. I've never been to Broadway theaters, but from what I've heard, Sight and Sound surpasses that quite a bit. But anyway, LeVar introduces us to today's book. It's called When Aunt Lena Did the Rhumba, written by Eileen Curtis Kleinman and illustrated by Diane Greenside. And today's presentation of this book was narrated by Lucy Arnaz. Now let's look up Lucy Arnaz and see what else she did. Lucy Arnaz is an actress and a singer. She did some work on The Lucy Show with Lucille Ball back in the 60s. She made appearances on Rowan and Martin's Laugh-In and The Wonderful World of Disney in the 70s. And she also did some work on Broadway. She did stage shows like They're Playing Our Song, Lost in Yonkers, Dirty Rotten Scoundrels, and Pippin, and a bunch of other shows around the country. Shows like Seesaw, Vanities, Bye Bye Birdie, Annie Get Your Gun, My One and Only, Wonderful Town, Masterclass, Witches of Eastwick. Oh, and she was in the movie The Jazz Singer in 1980. Alright, so she did some interesting stuff, not really anything that I recognize personally, aside from reading Rainbow. Now, unlike My America and The Milkmakers, this book is not a poetry book, and it's not a nonfiction book either. This is an actual storybook. So, just briefly, I'm going to tell you how the story goes. I won't go into every detail here. The story is about a woman named Aunt Lena, and the story is told in first person through this girl named Sophie. She's talking about how her Aunt Lena loves Broadway musicals and movie stars, and every Wednesday, Aunt Lena would go see a matinee show on Broadway. So obviously they live in New York, and every time Aunt Lena came home, she would dance around the kitchen and act out some of the things that she's seen. Aunt Lena loves to sing and dance, and she taught Sophie how to do a bunch of different dances. But then one day, Aunt Lena fell and sprained her ankle, and she wasn't able to go to Broadway one week, and she was very sad about that. So then Sophie came up with an idea to try to cheer up Aunt Lena by putting on a show for her. And she tried to ask different members of her family to help her out and take part in this show, but none of them were interested at first. So then Sophie went to her grandma and talked to her about her idea, and she was playing this really big elaborate show in the house where they get to wear costumes and play music and sing songs from Aunt Lena's favorite shows. And after a really good laugh, Grandma agrees to help her. So half an hour later, Sophie comes out wearing a really fancy outfit, and she starts singing, "Take me out to the ball game, take me out to the crowd." I don't know if she actually sang that in the book or not. I wish I had the book with me so I can compare it. It may or may not be in the book, because then she just kind of continues singing it in the background as the story continues. And after Sophie sings for a while, her two uncles finally join in and agree to take part in her show. So I don't know if Sophie lives with her aunt and uncles and her grandma instead of her parents. The story never mentions Sophie's parents, so maybe she does live with them, I don't know. And so they spend the next few days rehearsing their show together in the kitchen. And then that Wednesday, the day that Aunt Lena couldn't go to Broadway, and then Aunt Lena wakes up and says, "Hey, what's going on in here?" Because apparently they had decorated Aunt Lena's bedroom while she was asleep, and there was a big curtain in there. Then after she wakes up, they open the curtain and start singing and dancing. One of the uncles even had a bugle. And Sophie starts singing, "Give my regards to Broadway, remember me to Herald Square." I didn't hear the line that came after that because they were continuing the story as she was singing. It's "Give my regards to Broadway, remember me to Herald Square, tell all the gang at 42nd Street that I will soon be there." The last part where she says "be there," we actually do hear right after the narrator stops reading that part. And this is a song by George M. Cohan, and it's from the movie Yankee Doodle Dandy. Now, there was a movie called Take Me Out to the Ball Game that came out in 1949, but the song was originally a 1908 waltz song by Jack Norworth and Albert von Tilzer. And once again, I don't know if any of these songs were actually in the book or not, or if Reading Rainbow decided to add them in just for fun to give us the feel of Sophie and her family singing together. And after they sing and dance a beautiful performance, Aunt Lena chuckles and laughs and says, "Encore! Encore! Ooh!" The way she says encore, when I was little, I thought she said, "I'm cold" or something. But she's very happy because the show made her laugh and it was helping her feel better. So that was great. Really great story, but it ain't over yet. At the end of the story, eventually after Aunt Leah's ankle had healed, she took Sophie with her to Broadway and they went to see a show together. This story does a magnificent job describing everything that she sees, hears, and feels when these things happen. If you can by any chance find a copy of this book, I highly recommend you read it. It's a really good story. And as the lights dim and the show begins, Aunt Leah whispers to Sophie, "Now here is where the magic begins." Now remember that, that'll be important later. And then we see the words, "the end," and there's LeVar in the kitchen again, looking at the book and closing it because he just finished reading it. That was a nice little touch that they added during some of the later episodes, because back in the 80s and early 90s, at the end of the story, they just cut back to whatever LeVar was doing out on his adventures. But this is one of the episodes where we actually see LeVar closing the book after the story. That's really cool. Then LeVar recaps the story and explains how Sophie was happy to find the joy of singing and dancing inside her, and even though it took a little convincing, she got her whole family to join in too. And then he says that sometimes somebody has to give you a little push to help you take a chance that you might not have taken on your own. And that leads us into the next scene, featuring the Boys Choir of Harlem, led by Dr. Walter Turnbull. Now, for those of you who have seen all of the episodes before when Aunt Lena did the rumba, you'll probably recognize this segment, because this is actually a recycled scene from an earlier episode called Berlioz the Bear. That episode was all about the sounds of the city and city musicians, and they included this segment that featured the Boys Choir of Harlem to sort of go along with that episode's theme of music. And now they're using it again in the episode when Aunt Lena did the rumba, because this episode is all about performances and singing and dancing. Not only that, but they also used some footage from this scene in the spin-off show, The Puzzle Place. Does anybody remember The Puzzle Place? That was another PBS Kids show that was popular in the 90s. I didn't get to see much of it, but I have seen a little bit of it on YouTube, and it's actually really good. It was made by the creators of Reading Rainbow, and it's also a production of Lancet Media. And on top of all that, the Boys Choir of Harlem was also featured on Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood. He went to see them too. So they got quite a bit of screen time here on PBS. So throughout this segment, we see Dr. Turnbull and the boys practicing their choir songs, and Dr. Turnbull tells us about his experiences of teaching these kids and how wonderful it is to discover children who have great singing voices. And the kids even tell us how much that this experience of being in the choir has changed their life. I don't know the names of most of the songs that they sing here, but I do know that the first one, right when the segment first begins, is "I Will Lift Up Mine Eyes." It's based on Psalms 121, and it says, "I will lift up mine eyes unto the hills, from whence cometh my help." And so these interviews are pretty interesting. The conductor tells us that he's experienced some of the boys were kind of negative when they first came in, and then as time went on, as they began to get into become more involved with the choir and be part of a group that is committed to singing really good, then they kind of turn around and become better people. And the kids also comment on how the choir has helped them to become more mature and more of a man as opposed to a little boy. And they see Dr. Turnbull as their friend. One of the kids says that if he hadn't been in the choir, he wouldn't have gone to Japan or Europe or Italy or France or Berlin. Wow, that's really interesting. So did they actually get to go to all these places? Apparently so, because the next thing we hear is Dr. Turnbull saying that the boys know how to sing in Japanese because they had gone on a trip to Japan, if I'm hearing it correctly. So that's really cool they got to do that. Now, in the episode Berlioz the Bear, in the original version, they go into a little bit more detail about how they learned to sing in Japanese, but it's a little bit shorter in this episode. And as the boys practice, we do see Dr. Turnbull stopping once in a while and pointing out some mistakes that they're making or improvements that they should make. As the interview continues, Dr. Turnbull makes a very powerful statement. He says that it's important that we give kids a sense of purpose and a sense of going for it. Do it, he says. Don't wait for someone else to do it. Do it. That's really good. I'm glad he said that. And immediately afterward, things get a little bit more upbeat. We see the boys are all standing up, and they're singing and dancing now. I wish I knew what song they were singing here. It's kind of cool. Things sort of like, do-wop, whoa, do-wop, wake up, so you may sing, do-wop. I have no idea if those are actually the lyrics, but that's what it sounds like. It's kind of fun. Now, this dance studio has a big wooden floor, and there's a mirror on the one wall, and there's actually somebody playing the piano there. Then we get to hear the boys sing a song that they had written called The Joy of Singing. Joy of singing, joy, 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 joy of singing. So this is a really cool, fun segments with some really nice songs, some good singing, and interesting stories about these kids' lives turning around because they joined the choir. I don't really have a whole lot else to say about it, though, and believe it or not, we've already reached the halfway point of this episode, and we're only 27 minutes in here almost. So it looks like this is going to be a much shorter Reading Rainbow edition of Kids TV and Me. It won't be 2 hours like the first two, where it'll probably just be close to an hour. So I'm not even going to bother with an intermission. I'll just put the contact information at the very end. As the choir segment ends, all the boys sing one very long, glorious note. You see all the boys with their 80s haircuts and outfits. That's how I knew that they used the exact same footage from this Reading Rainbow episode on the Puzzle Place, because the kids had the exact same outfits. Some of the footage is a little bit different, though. The Puzzle Place used a few little pieces that they didn't use on Reading Rainbow, but they were all shot the exact same day. I especially recognize the kid in the back with the Pepsi shirt on. Now then, we see LeVar in his kitchen once again. For years I thought LeVar was pouring milk out of that, tea kettle, but I think he's just pouring himself a cup of tea for his breakfast. LeVar says, for those young men, being a part of the choir is not just about singing and dancing, but it's about discovering the joy of performing for an audience. And he says, when you sing or dance or make someone laugh, you're actually sharing a part of who you are with other people. And that's what makes Pierre Pitofsky, this very funny man, very happy. Now then, listen up, people. This is where this episode really gets interesting, because when I was little, the first couple years that I watched this tape, my mom always fast-forwarded this segment. She would not let me watch this part. Buckle up, people. Today, we're going to find out why. Okay, we have an abrupt cut to what looks like some kind of party or show or something. There's people clapping, and there's an announcer saying, please welcome Pierre Pitofsky. And we see this guy running onto a stage and crashing right into his microphone and falling down and then staggering back to his feet. His interview begins with him describing himself as, like, a human animation comparable to a Warner Brothers cartoon. Before we dive any further into this, I just want to say that this comedy club or whatever it is that he's performing at looks very 80s. Got some cool designs in the background with some palm trees and a flamingo and stuff. I think this place is called the L.A. C-A-L-A-R-E-T, perhaps? Let me look this up. Yeah, no, maybe we'll get another angle of that sign later, because it's right there on the stage with him, so we'll see quite a bit of that, I'm sure. So anyway, I remember this part's where this guy, his name is Pierre Pitofsky, he kind of stretches out his cheeks with his fingers and says, that's not a real face. That's not real. Then he lets go and says, that's real, and makes some other kind of funny face. Now we see him on stage again. He's wearing these big overalls, it looks like. He says, this is called half a man. And he sticks his arms down inside the overalls, so it looks like he's just a pair of legs with a head on top. Okay, that is kind of funny. So he's a stand-up comedian, it looks like. Now this guy specifically describes himself as a clown. He says that when he was growing up, he used to imitate people, like his brother, his fathers, his grandmother, and his mother used to think it was funny. And he tries to do an imitation of a blowfish snoring. Oh boy, let's see if I can do this here. I got a microphone right in front of me, so he kind of starts with a regular inhale snore, and then he puffs his cheeks out and kind of spits into the microphone like this. Something like that. Sounds a lot better when he does it, of course. So that's a blowfish snoring, huh? Peter says that he's often nervous when he's on stage because he wants his audience to love him so much that he'll do just about anything, within reason. So, what exactly is this guy's definition of reason? We'll find out in a minute. Okay, now we see him. He's actually not on stage. He's standing in front of, I don't know if this is supposed to be some kind of dinner theater or what this is, but there's people sitting at tables in the audience, and they've got food and drinks in front of them. So now Peter has a paper cup on this table, and he's right there with the audience, and he's trying to drink out of the cup without picking it up. And then he gets really carried away and just sort of bashes his forehead down into the cup, and it crushes, and water sprays everywhere, including onto the audience, I think, and into the popcorn that the people are eating, and on the camera, of course. And now, what's happening here? He's kind of on his hands and knees, acting like a maniac, going blah, 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 blah. And for whatever reason, there's this old lady on stage with him. Is she one of the people in the audience that he asked for a volunteer and she went up? What is she supposed to be doing there? I wouldn't want to be too close to this guy if he's acting like that. Come on. I don't know if she's supposed to be part of the act or not. So then he tells us that when he decided that he wanted to do this comedy thing, he says, okay, what do I need to do? I need to watch. Who do I watch? Charlie Chaplin, Laurel and Hardy, and Buster Keaton, who were supposedly the greatest comedians ever lived. He said that they were his teachers. And we see black and white footage of these guys just falling down, running into walls. That Buster Keaton shot right there is really weird. He's just standing in front of his house, and then the entire front of the house just falls down right on top of him. Fortunately, the place where he's standing is right where the window comes down, and I don't think there's any glass in that window, just curtains. Okay, there's that part with the guy dancing really fast and silly. That's kind of cool. And now Peter's dancing around. Okay, the LA Cabaret. That's what this place is called. Cabaret, LA Cabaret. And apparently it was some kind of comedy club back in the 80s. And Peter's dancing around. That's the most civilized thing I've seen him do all day so far. He said when he was 15, he watched a PBS special. How appropriate, this is actually on PBS. He actually saw a PBS special about Buster Keaton, and all it showed were all of his falls. Why am I not surprised? And they show a little more of that. The guy's standing there. He's got his foot on a pile of rope, and then somebody picks up the pile of rope, and his foot's tangled in it, and the guy falls down and tumbles around. And then we see him trying to run away into this outdoor scene, but it turns out it's just a backdrop, and he crashes into it and falls down. Kablam. Okay, there's that same old lady again, and Peter says to her, throw me into the wall, just whip me into the wall. I guess this guy probably assumed that he had annoyed her so much that she would just want to do away with him by now, so he's giving her the chance to do that. So the old lady gives a little push, and then he literally just runs into the wall, and apparently looks like he bangs his face and just falls down. Back on stage, he tries to sit in a metal folding chair, and he falls down. Then he angrily picks up the chair and closes it, and yow, apparently it looks like he pinched his thumb. And good gravy, mister, what is wrong with you? He then opens the chair back up again, and then just bangs his face right into it. Thank you, Mom. Thank you for fast-forwarding this. I get it now. How is this show rated TV-wide? My goodness. This was on Reading Rainbow? I disapprove. If my kids are going to watch this episode, I'll probably skip past this part too. This is horrible. There is one silver lining, though. Peter does tell us that all of the stunts and falls that he does, you don't want to try these at home because you will hurt yourself. He says all of his falls are illusions. He pretends that he's hurting himself, but it's acting. And then he gives us an example. He holds a glass of water, and he pretends to take a drink of water, and it appears that he banged his tooth into it. But it turns out that he just tapped the glass with the finger on his ring, the ring on his finger, making a little ting sound right when the glass was close to his tooth. So the illusion was that he banged the glass on his tooth, but it was actually his ring. So that's kind of interesting. Not that I would recommend that anybody actually try to do that, but it's kind of nice to know that he didn't actually hurt his tooth there. Oh, now we have Pierre just trying to place his 2 feet on top of a tall stool. He lifts his foot up, places it on there, and then he tries to lift the other foot and place it on there, and of course he falls down to the ground. Oh, I don't even want to think about how many kids who weren't paying attention to what he was saying tried to do this at home. Yikes. What? Who lets a kid that little watch stuff like this? There's literally a little, 3 or 4-year-old in that audience. And I think there was some other little kid there too. Who in their right mind would let a kid that little watch this kind of garbage live? In person? It's bad enough seeing this stuff on TV. Then Pierre holds onto his microphone and falls down on his side with it, and from there kind of stands on his head and says, "My, what a fine-looking audience tonight." Then he tells us that the trick is to make it look easy and show people that you're not really hurt. Let me think about that for a second. Okay. See, for many years, and this is still my opinion today, I hate slapstick comedy. Especially the kind where real people are pretending to hurt themselves or each other. I do not find that funny at all. I mean, seeing things when I was very little, like the Foley family on the big comfy couch and Mr. Noodle on Sesame Street's Elmo's World, those were scary enough for me back then. And later as I got older, I thought, if guys like this are doing things like that and pretending they're hurting themselves, what the heck's gonna happen if he makes a mistake and hurts himself for real? I was always afraid that everybody would think it's just part of the act and nobody would help him. But now that I'm listening to this guy a little more closely and thinking about it a little more, it is true that when he does do something like that, a few seconds later he immediately just gets right up and does some other crazy thing. So he literally does prove to us that he's not really hurt. So I just got that revelation right now. It's just hot off the press. So that does make me feel a little bit better. That does not make me want to enjoy this stuff anymore, though. But when I was in elementary school, I think it was either 4th or 5th grade, we had a magician come to our school. There was this big assembly in the auditorium, and he did all kinds of crazy stuff that kind of freaked me out. The worst one being, this is the only part I really remember, he asked one of the kids to come up. One of them volunteered, and so this girl sat there, and this magician pretended to do some kind of really old-fashioned surgery on her, where he put a box over her head and took these long needles and poked them into the box. Upon seeing that, I was only 9 or 10 years old, upon seeing that, I was on the verge of, running to get the principal or something, because I thought he was doing something absolutely horrible. I don't think I actually did, though, but I felt sick enough that I had to leave the room. The girl who volunteered in the acts was okay, for the record. But yeah, this never was my idea of a good time. Alright, is this almost over? You got anything else to say, mister? Okay, here's the part where he does the demonstration with the glass. I got a little ahead of myself there. I remember that part, but I thought it was right at that moment that I mentioned earlier, but it's not until now. Okay. Oh, I see. Now that's how he got away with that crushing the cup thing, because the front tables are literally right up against the stage, so the guys sitting there eating, watching the show have to kind of look straight up in order to watch him. It's kind of weird. I would not want to be that close. He concludes by saying that his goal in life is to make the whole world laugh, give his show to as many people as possible, and just make everybody happy. Make everybody happy, huh? I'm not entirely sure this is the way to do that. Dang, I certainly hope that he's not listening to this. And I'm sorry if I offended anybody who enjoys this kind of stuff. I mean, you do you, I guess. This kind of slapstick comedy is just not for me. It's really not. I'm sorry. Final two shots, he does some other kind of silly thing where... Oh, that makes me think of, like an old Christmas ornaments that we had where you pull the string and, like, the wooden snowman's legs go up and down. He's kind of doing something like that. And the last shot, he's got a handkerchief and does a really big, exaggerated sneeze that kind of spins him around like a cartoon, and he lands flat on his back. Okay. Probably the only really good thing that I got out of that segment was the part where Peter was saying that, when he was figuring out what he wanted to do, and he wanted to learn how to be a comedian, he said, okay, what do I do? I need to watch. Who do I watch? All these guys, Buster Keaton, Laurel and Hardy, Charlie Chaplin. That makes me think of what I decided to do when I first decided I wanted to be a writer. When I first decided I wanted to write a story about a girl named Zoe Richards, I said, okay, what do I need to do? I need to read. Who do I read? Judy Moody, Junie B. Jones, Amber Brown, Clementine, Amelia Rules, all those fabulous books. They were my teachers. And that's how I came up with lots of ideas for the book that I wrote. So it's kind of an interesting little parallel there between the way he learned how to do his thing and I learned how to do mine. That's probably the only thing I like about that. And for those of you parents out there who are concerned about what your kids are watching, this is exactly why I do this podcast. I'm going to go through all these old shows that I watched growing up and point out the parts of it that were good and the parts that were bad. In this case, despite the fact that Reading Rainbow is my favorite PBS Kids show of all time, this particular segment of this particular episode... Oh, I should also mention... I should have mentioned this earlier. This is another recycled segment. It was originally from the episode Ludlow Laughs, which is probably my least favorite episode of the series, because that one is loaded with all kinds of slapstick garbage. And the clown that tries to teach LeVar how to be funny is really creepy in that. And that episode ends with a ridiculous pie fight, which I don't like either. My food allergies are nowhere near as bad as they used to be, but as a kid growing up being completely gluten-free and dairy-free, pie fights were horrifying. Because, like, if I got hit in the face with a pie, what was I supposed to do? I couldn't even eat the stuff. Even though I could probably eat most pies now, I still don't like the idea of... I mentioned this a couple weeks ago when we did Frog and Toad, the ice cream episode. I want my desserts in me, not on me. But yeah, Ludlow Laughs is, in my opinion, the worst episode of Reading Rainbow, despite the fact that it has some interesting Reading Rainbow outtakes in the beginning of that episode. It's the only good thing that's in it. But yeah, this segment with the stand-up comedian Pierre Pitofsky was originally from Ludlow Laughs, and now they used it again for when Lena did the Rhumba, and it's really bad. So parents, please keep that in mind. If this is something that you do not want your kids to see, make sure you're there to skip past it or avoid this episode altogether. I mean, I wish this wasn't in here, because the rest of this episode is actually pretty good. So let's continue on now. Alright, now that nightmare is over, we see LeVar in his kitchen once again. He says that Peter loves what he does because his relationship with the audience is electric. He says performing for any audience is exciting, but what most performers dream of is being on the Broadway stage. For some, it's just the cat's meow. And as he says that, we see a billboard for the Broadway musical, Cats. Now, at the age of 3, I didn't know what the term, the cat's meow, meant. Google says that the idiom the cat's meow means something or someone that is outstanding, excellent, highly fashionable, or wonderful. But when I was very little, I was not able to fully put that into context because I didn't get to hear most of LeVar's commentary between these two segments because, like I said, Mom fast-forwarded most of the Peter Pitofsky thing, and by the time LeVar came back on and Mom pressed play again and the fast-forwarding slowed down to the regular play speed, I pretty much already missed, like, 3/4 of his little speech there. And by the time the VCR would start playing again, I would hear the audio, it would just go right to LeVar saying, it's just the cat's meow. And I assume that just meant that now we're going to talk about the Cats, this Broadway musical. And then after that, he just says meow, because, you know, that's what cats say, meow. Like, now let's talk about the Cats, and, you know, meow. Now, before I forget, I will say right away that this is another recycled segment. This one was from the episode Duncan and Dolores, which was all about cats big and small. That was the one where LeVar went to Marine World and visited some tiger trainers. And the book Duncan and Dolores was about a little girl and her cat. And then in the second half, LeVar said that cats have been the inspiration for lots of stories and also this Broadway musical. And that brings us into this scene that we have here that they're reusing for when Aunt Lena did the Rhumba. Now first we have a little montage of various shots from the actual Broadway show. Now this version of the cat scene is a lot different than Duncan and Dolores. They use a lot of the same footage, but a little bit of it's different. And of course, this version in when Aunt Lena did the Rhumba is a lot shorter than the original one from Duncan and Dolores. So now we're introduced to Lonnie Ackerman, who plays Grisabella, the glamour cat. And we see her in the makeup room, and she's getting ready to play the part on Broadway, and she's got part of her costume on. And we see her putting on her makeup to look more like a cat. She's using special pencils and paintbrushes to do this. This is another thing that reminds me of Hands-On House Children's Museum in Lancaster. I don't think they have this anymore, but when I was little, they used to have a face painting station. And a lot of the kids used to, paint their faces there, and I know a lot of them had some kind of cat design on their face. I think I had one like that too at one point. I think maybe the first time I went there. But I didn't really like it. The paint felt really weird on my face, and just felt kind of sad when we got home to have to wash it off. Like, what was the point of putting this all on my face if we have to just wash it all away anyway? This goes back to the whole thing of, I didn't like having stuff on my fingers or my skin or my face. I remember one time when we went to Hands-On House, I went there with a friend from school, and she was painting her face, and instead of doing my face, I just put a few little colors of paints onto the back of my hand. Like a little compromise. I mean, it was something, but I just thought it was a little bit better than having it on my face, because, A, I could see where it was, and B, it didn't have to, make my face look weird or feel uncomfortable or anything like that. So, that was interesting. Anyway, this scene here on Reading Rainbow with Lonnie Ackerman painting her face as Grisabella the Glamour Cat made me think of that. As a kid, I was glad that she was enjoying it, but looking at that, I thought, no thank you, that's not something I want to do. Didn't like face painting. When they shortened this segment for this later episode, they made a slight mistake here. Right after she says, okay, here comes the nose, we see her lips moving a little bit, but she doesn't, we don't hear her saying anything. She originally said something else after that in Duncan and Dolores, but instead we hear, a cat hissing sound, I guess they were trying to replace that little piece of whatever she was saying with that, but it didn't really work, because it didn't fit well with the way her lips were moving. I thought it was just some little random background sound, some big heavy thing being moved around, or a box banged to the ground, I don't know. It wasn't until I finally discovered Duncan and Dolores that there was one part where she actually looks at us and opens her mouth and goes, like a cat hissing. Now this one shot right here with Lonnie drawing these lines around her eyes made me pretty uncomfortable, because the way she draws those lines are, she gets really, really close to her real eye. In fact, some of it even goes up against her, bottom eyelashes a little bit. And now we got a montage of all the other actors and actresses putting on their makeup and their costumes, getting ready for the big show. And this is accompanied by some really exciting upbeat music.
I've dreamt of being on Broadway.
And now we finally see everybody on stage performing the Cats musical on Broadway. It's kind of a similar montage to what we saw in the beginning of this segment. And Lonnie tells us how everything all comes together, and she enjoys playing a cat in this show. And finally, the segment ends with Grisabella singing the final lines of the memory song. If you touch me, you'll understand what happiness is. Look, a new day has begun. That's all they used for when Lena did the Rhumba, but in Duncan and Dolores, it starts a little bit earlier with, touch me, it's so easy to leave me all alone with the memory of my days in the sun, and then if you touch me, you'll understand what happiness is, etc. About 6 years later, though, I got to hear the entire song. NBC did a singing and dancing competition show called Grease, You're the One That I Want, in which all these young men and women were auditioning to be on the Broadway musical of Grease. It was like 2 competitions in one. The guys were competing to play Danny, and the girls were competing to play Sandy. It was kind of like American Idol or The X Factor or The Voice. A very similar concept, where they get to do these performances on TV, and then and after the show, you pick up the telephone and vote for the one that you want. And one of the contestants sang this song from the musical Cats. And when she got towards the end of that song, it was like, oh yeah, it's that song from Reading Rainbow. Of course, she sang a little bit different than it was on Reading Rainbow, but I recognize the lyrics. But yeah, even though I'm not a big fan of the actual Grease movie, let alone the musical, Grease, You're the One That I Want was a pretty good show. It was the first singing competition TV show that I ever watched. I was 9 years old when that was on the air, and my mom recorded all of the live shows for me, and I would watch them the next day, because I didn't usually stay up that late in the evening. As a matter of fact, the nights that this girl sang the memory song from Cats, they had a special guest judge on that night, Andrew Lloyd Webber, who was the creator of Cats. And so that show aired in 2007, about 6 years after I saw this Reading Rainbow episode in 2001. Alright, so after Grisabella sings A New Day Has Begun, the end of that song, we get some applause, and then we fade to black and back to LeVar's kitchen once more, and he's reading his newspaper to see which Broadway show he should go see. We don't hear the names of any of these shows he's looking at, but he does read some of the reviews for them. Thrilling, exhilarating, a laugh riot, don't miss it. The front cover of the paper he's looking at says, Best Musical Tony Award Nomination. Can't see which show it is, though. But this leads LeVar to saying to us that one way to choose a good show is to see what others have to say about it, and the same is true of choosing a good book. So, here are 3 smash hits that you won't want to miss. But you don't have to take my word for it. Now it's time for the book reviews, which means the show's almost over. The first one is called My Mama Had Dancing Heart by Libba Moore Gray. It's about a little girl and her mom dancing together through the years, having lots of fun together, and the girl eventually grew up to become a ballet dancer, and she remembered how fun it was to dance with her mom when she was younger. My Mama Had a Dancing Heart by Libba Moore Gray, and illustrated by Raul Cohn. And next up, we have The Dancing Man by Ruth Lercher Bornstein. And The Dancing Man gives an orphan boy named Joseph these silver shoes to give him the power to bring joy to others through dance. And yes, that's actually the book that was featured in the updated opening scene. That part of the opening where the kid was opening up the book, then the paintbrush came out, which then revealed the picture of the chalk artist. The book that the kid opens up is The Dancing Man by Ruth Lercher Bornstein. And this was the episode that it came from, when Aunt Lena did the Rhumba. It actually makes sense because the updated intro was made about a year after that episode came out. So after they changed the intro, we got to see the cover of that book in every single opening scene. And this is the episode where the kid actually reviews it. Cool. And the third and final review book for this episode is The Old Man Who Loved to Sing by John Winch. It's about an old man who lives by himself way out in a deserted valley, and there's no people around, just different animals. And the old man loves to sing, and the animals enjoy listening to him sing as well. As time goes on, the man gets older and older, and he can't really sing anymore. And the animals were sad at first, and they eventually start making music of their own. And the kid who does the review makes the sounds of the animals. The frog, zip, 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 the bird, and the horse. And that's it for the book reviews. Now let's hear LeVar's final words. Hey, that's interesting. Right by the front door, he's getting ready to leave, there's a framed picture of the book they talked about that day. Huh. It's an interesting little decoration for this particular episode. Makes me wonder if LeVar enjoyed that book so much that he decided to hang the picture up on his wall of that book. I don't know how long it stayed up there, if that's even his house at all, or if they just did all this for a backdrop for the purposes of this show. When I was like 3 and 4 years old, my bedroom, in fact, the same bedroom I'm sitting in now, used to have printed out paper pictures of the covers of books that were featured on Reading Rainbow. Reading Rainbow was my favorite show at the time, so we decorated my room with kind of a Reading Rainbow theme. We had the Reading Rainbow logo in one corner, we had the covers of How to Make an Apple Pie and See the World, The Sign Painter's Dream, Owen, Uncle Jed's Barbershop, Lemonade for Sale, Watch the Stars Come Out, and might be a few others too. I think we had Archibald Frisbee up there, Celebrate the 50 States from My America, and Darcy and Gran Don't Like Babies from Owen. I don't know if I ever actually read most of those books, though. I think I might have read some of them, but I was mostly just interested in the covers because they remind me of my favorite show. But yeah, I still have those pictures in the filing cabinet in the basement downstairs. They're not hanging in my room anymore, but I still have them. I'll pull them out and take a look at them again sometime. Maybe I'll show them to you guys. Alright. LeVar's closing dialogue. He says, whether you're performing for a Broadway audience, or for your school play, or just for the fun of it, there's nothing better than the feeling you get when you perform. So, find a performer inside of you. You might be surprised at the talents you discover. LeVar says, well, I gotta go. He's just about to open the door, and as he leaves, he says, as Aunt Lena would say, and now the magic begins, which was the way the book ended. Remember that? It's not the exact same words, because Aunt Lena said, now here is where the magic begins. LeVar says, and now the magic begins. He says, I'll see you next time. And as he leaves and closes the door behind him, the camera stays inside the house and then pans over to the picture of the book on the wall, and then the credits start rolling. And while this happens, we hear the similar kind of music that they showed in the New York City montage in the beginning, right after LeVar came out of the shower. And this is also accompanied by those final few notes of music that we heard at the end of When Aunt Lena Did the Rhumba, like the actual story. So it turns out that those two music tracks kind of go together. Yeah, this is one of those times where we don't hear the main Reading Rainbow theme during the credits, but we have a different one, something special. And it's kind of a cute little tune. I'll play it for you when we're finished. But first, let's look at these credits. Alright, during the later seasons of Reading Rainbow, they showed the supervising producers first. Cecily Truett, Larry Lancet, and Orly Wiseman. Larry and Cecily were the original producers during the first few seasons. Produced by Stacey Rader, directed by Mark Minucci, written by Jill R. Gluckson. Music producer by Steve Horlick, and Oasis Music, of course. Makeup by Stephanie Cozart Burton. That was actually LeVar's wife. Still is. So that was kind of cool that she got to work on the show with him. Okay, now we have comic segment, directed by Dean Parasot, and cat segment, directed by Ed Wiseman. I'm surprised it didn't show the director of the choir scene. But since these were from 2 different episodes, they had different directors, and so they added those to the credits. Special thanks to Boniu Brian Brown. Who's that? Okay, that's a public relations firm in New York. And also special thanks to the Publicity Office. The Publicity Office is an entertainment agency in New York, and that must be where they got the stock footage of Times Square and all the Broadway shows and stuff. I looked at the credits for Duncan and Dolores, and the Reading Rainbow crew actually went behind the scenes of the Cats musical. So that was not stock footage, they actually did that themselves. All the other Broadway stuff that we saw in the beginning was stock footage. Executive producers, Twyla C. Liggett, Tony Bettino, LeVar Burton. Produced by Lancet Media, and a production of GPN and WNED TV. Copyright 1998. And I don't think I mentioned this yet, but at the end of every episode, after the credits, well, with the exception of the first season, but everything from season 2 onward, they always show the 4 books one more time, and LeVar says, today's Reading Rainbow books are, and then lists out the titles, the authors, illustrators, and publishers of each book. From a very young age, I learned the names of a lot of publishing companies then. Okay, that's it. That was Reading Rainbow, When Aunt Lena Did the Rhumba. Interesting episode. This is one of those late 90s episodes that mostly consists of flashbacks from previous episodes. There wasn't really a whole lot of new material in this. It was just LeVar sitting in the kitchen talking and getting ready to go to some Broadway musical of some sort. We never find out which one, but hopefully he saw something good. The actual book, when Aunt Lena did the Rhumba, was good. I enjoyed that story. The scene with the Boys Choir of Harlem, that was good. Behind the scenes of Cats, I enjoyed that too. But of course, the real eyesore of this episode is the comedy segment. I did not like that at all. It's kind of sad that they had to put that in there, because everything else was really good, but with that ridiculous stuff, it almost ruins this episode for me unless I fast forward it. Yeah, out of all the 12 episodes that I have on this particular DDK-HS videocassette, I'd say this one's probably my least favorite out of the 12. All the others are a lot better than this. But like I said, most of it I enjoyed. The stuff with Peter Pitofsky you might want to avoid, though. Because see, here's the deal. If you have very young children, or children on the autism spectrum, or any kind of kid that is not fully able to understand the context of the situation, one of two things is going to happen. Either A, your child will be terribly frightened, or B, they might think that the stuff that this guy is doing looks fun, and they're going to want to try to do it themselves, and most likely hurt themselves in the process. So, if you decide to let your kids watch this, please be extra cautious and keep that in mind. And also, make sure your kids understand that if they see somebody get hurt for real, it is not good to laugh at them. I mean, a comedian like this, if they're pretending to get hurt and obviously not getting hurt for real, then, well, if your kids think it's funny, I suppose they could laugh if they want to. I personally disagree. I wouldn't want to laugh at stuff like that, but, you know. If my mom had known that this was going to be in this episode, she might not have recorded it. Or at the very least, paused the VCR when it got to that scene. But I eventually did watch the entire thing start to finish when I was maybe 9 or 10, and it didn't really hurt me all that much. But I will say this, though. About a year before this, in 2000, that was the year that Dora the Explorer first came out. And one of the early episodes of that show was called Hick Boom Oh. Do any of you guys remember that one? That was the one where Dora and Boots kept hearing this sounds like hick boom oh, and they go on an adventure to try to figure out what this sound is. And in the end, it turns out that Benny has the hiccups, and every time he says hick, he kind of jumps up in the air, and then he falls down and lands on his behind and goes boom, and kind of grunts, oh. He keeps doing that over and over because he has the hiccups. If I remember correctly, I think I saw this episode maybe once or twice, and for whatever dumb reason, I thought what Benny was doing looked kind of fun, because I was not able to fully understand the context of the situation. I didn't know if it was supposed to be a good thing or a bad thing. I just thought, it is what it is. And so I started doing that. I would say hick and jump up into the air and land on my rear end and go boom and say, oh. And I would do that again and again until my mom told me to stop because I might hurt myself. And the way I was doing it, I was probably pretty close to hurting myself. I don't know if I actually did or not, but yeah, I shouldn't have been doing that. It was kind of dangerous. So with that in mind, use extreme caution with this particular episode of Reading Rainbow, because I just want your kids to be safe, both physically and spiritually. Don't want them to be scarred in any way by this. So yeah, that's that. A Reading Rainbow episode with a performance theme. I've been in a few school plays before. When I was in 4th and 5th grade, the elementary school that I went to had a special drama club for kids with autism, and I was a part of that for 2 years. It was kind of fun. The one year we did a pirate play called Captain Blackboot's Island. I was DJ, Davy Jones Jr. That was a lot of fun. That was probably the best acting job I ever did in my life. The year after, though, was Humpty Dumpty is Missing. I played Sherlock Scoop, and that play was terrible. Because, A, the story was really confusing and had a lot of lines that I barely remembered. I just read the cue cards through most of the play. And B, I was just getting over a cold, so I wasn't really in that great of a acting mood, so I kind of bombed that one. I haven't really been in major performances since then. I would kind of like to, though. I don't know when or how, but if I ever make Zoe Richards into a TV show, I would love to play either her dad or her grandpa or both, like be a voice actor. That might be kind of fun. We'll see what the future holds. In the meantime, I'm going to continue doing this podcast and hopefully get my next book out there. I've recently started illustrating it. I'll share the illustrations with the first chapter with you guys very soon. But at the moment, I've been making a series of daily pictures to celebrate the 25th anniversary of Jimmy Gownley's Amelia Rules graphic novels. A friend on social media challenged me to create a different picture every day, all through the month of February. If you've been following me on Instagram or Substack, you probably got to see most of those. And I'm having a lot of fun with it. She gave me a list with, different themes every single day. One day do a picture that has something to do with a pet, something about no school, something about Amelia's birthday, all kind of stuff like that. It's a lot of fun, and Amelia Rules is my favorite graphic novel series of all time, so if you haven't already, be sure to go ahead and read those, and maybe even buy Jimmy's books. I'm sure he'd really appreciate that. And if you're listening to this on Substack, right here on Substack, you can listen to Jimmy Gownley's Dumb Ideas podcast, in which he talks about how he created his characters, and he gives some advice to aspiring authors and artists and cartoonists. I really enjoy that podcast, and Jimmy Gownley is also the host of another podcast called Unpacking Peanuts, co-hosted with Michael Cohen and Harold Buckles, in which they talk about the history of Charles Schultz's characters, Charlie Brown and Snoopy, and all the things that they love about everyone's favorite comic strip. So I highly recommend that too. And speaking of podcasts, next month we'll be doing another episode of Reading Rainbow in the first week of April. That episode will be Watch the Stars Come Out. Ooh yeah, Watch the Stars Come Out. That one is really good. That's one of my favorite episodes. I'm looking forward to talking to you about that next month. Next week, we're going to analyze 3 episodes of Kipper the Dog. Next week's Kipper episodes will be Pig's Shop, Water, Water Everywhere, and The Costume Party. That'll be next week. Until we meet again, this is Joshua Stauffer, signing out. Have a wonderful day, and thanks for listening.
As Aunt Lena would say. And now, the magic begins. I'll see you next time.
Kids TV and Me is a fan-made podcast and is not affiliated with any of the programs, production companies, or networks mentioned on the show. My primary goal of this podcast is to shine a spotlight on some of the underrated classics from my childhood, and to help you make informed decisions about your children's screen time. If you are enjoying this podcast, don't forget to leave a rating and a review. And if your podcast provider has a comment section, let me know your thoughts on the topics we've talked about today. To keep the conversation going, you can also leave me a message on Instagram at Joshua Stauffer Creations. And don't forget to check out my Substack page at joshuastauffer1.substack.com, where you can find more information on my other creative works, including my Little Joshua webcomics and my book, Meet Zoe Richards, which is available in paperback on Amazon. Remember to always pay close attention to what your children are watching, and as always, don't be childish, but stay childlike.